One of these renders is Unreal and the other is Blender and Eevee. Which one do you like more? Today's video I'm going to show you how I brought this drone into Unreal Engine 5 and share some of my thoughts as to why you would do such a thing. Okay, so we're in Blender, and just to get it out of the way, I prefer using Unreal Engine for a lot of my workflows, working in motion graphics and board game trailers and video game stuff, because I want to be closer to video games, and Blender is not a game engine. So I make my assets in Blender or Cinema 4D, and I bring them into Unreal so that I could potentially use them for game engines, or I can practice the skill of getting content from 3D software into a game engine, so then maybe one day I could work on making a game. Anywho, that being said, when it comes to working with Unreal, you need to understand that Unreal is basically a very picky child. And if you feed the child anything other than chicken nuggets, it's going to fight back and scream and cry until you give it chicken nuggets. What I mean by that is game engines really just like very basic geometry. So that means no modifiers, no extra bells and whistles. The content that you're bringing into Unreal should have UVs, etc. We're not going to do the full breakdown of making game assets, but what I will do is show you the topology of this and the scene statistics. If you look in the lower right hand corner over here, we can see that I have over 1 million triangles. This is way too much for any sort of game asset that you would ever use. But for the point of this tutorial and showing you how to get assets from Blender into Unreal, you need to collapse all of the modifiers. So to get started with that, we're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and we're going to go to Add-ons and type in Modifier Tools. I'm pretty sure that's what this add-on is. If you don't have Modifier Tools enabled, save. And it's still there. Well, that's okay. I'm pretty sure it's this one. I'll leave a note in the description if it's not this one, and I realize it's just not loading correctly. But we want to use this menu here because we need to collapse all these modifiers, whether you're using booleans or not. If I go to local view, this object has some sort of boolean somewhere, and we can turn this off. Yes, these guys right here. So if you want to do it without add-ons, you would go to the drop-down menu and apply, and then apply your bevel if you want the nice clean bevels of your object, or you would just let it go as is or delete the bevel. But generally speaking, if you don't apply the bevel, then it will be harder to UV later. So depends on your goals for the asset you're making. You could just delete the bevel and now we have this hard edge, and that generally doesn't look as good when you're up close to a model, but for game engines it may not matter, mainly because you're not typically looking that close for a game asset. Anywho, what I'm trying to say is apply all your modifiers. So I'm going to go ahead and select all my meshes, and with this Modifiers Tools add-on, just hit apply all. Go here. What's this? Does it look good? Basically, you want to go in and check every piece of your mesh and hit apply all. Go here. There's definitely way more subdivisions that we need on this, so we can bring this down maybe, and then go to apply all. Go here, set control 1, and apply all. And the reason why I'm bringing it down to 1 subdivision is we don't need that much, but we want to make sure that we have a good amount of geometry to maintain the shape and the silhouette. And that's the number one most important thing about working with game engines and game assets. You want to make sure you're maintaining the silhouette of your object. I'm pulling that from traditional art practices in general. I didn't go to art school. I got this from Abe Leal and the Blender Bros courses. Follow your silhouette. So if we take away some subdivisions on our model, but it still looks really, really good from far away, the silhouette is there, then you don't need that much geometry. To maintain this curvature, I am going to keep this subdivision here. So we'll just hit apply all, and I'm just going to go ahead and apply all of these modifiers off camera. A
few moments later.
Alright, so I just finished applying all my modifiers, and it's definitely a very dense mesh. And for motion graphics in Unreal, this may be the workflow that you need to adopt, because again, we just need to feed Unreal very basic geometry. So the next step for this is going to apply all of our UVs or create UVs for every single piece here before we combine our mesh. So let's just do this one piece for now. And the easiest way is to select your asset. Let's go to the UV edit tab here, select whatever we want to UV. Let's just select this first piece here, tab, and then go to edit, or you can go to your edit mode over here and hit A. We can see here that we have our UVs, but this is definitely not right. The easiest way to fix this is go up to the UV tab in your viewport, not your UV viewer, and then go to Smart UV Project and then hit unwrap, and it'll do its best to try and unwrap all of this geometry. So what you have to do now for a game asset is every single piece needs to have some sort of UVs. So let's just go ahead and do that. Depending on the complexity of your object, it might be very simple or very easy, but we're gonna do that right now. And to do that, we're going to select everything as I do here. Go ahead and just make a box around it. And we're going to try it. We're going to see what happens if I just go ahead and select everything and go to Smart UV Project and just let it do its thing. Because there's so much stuff in the scene, it may just fight back and hate us because there's so much stuff. But we just tried that. Let's give it a look. Is that going to kinda, sorta? Yeah, alright. It's probably not going to be the best unwrap, but it's going to be something. Okay, cool. Basically, we're just checking our geometry here, and then from here, I'm going to select everything again, hit A to select everything in my UV port here. Now, I want to go up to the UV tab in my UV viewer and go to average island scale, and this is basically going to try and look at the size of all the geometry in our scene and sort of scale up to take up as much of the UV space as possible. And then we're going to go to the same tab and then go to pack islands and then click OK, and it's going to try and fit all this geometry in here. Okay, cool. So now we have all this stuff in here. It's definitely not going to be the best pack. And the reason why is because if you're trying to actually make a real game asset, if you were to go in and like look at this shell, for example, if I go ahead and solo this, go to this shell on the inside, we can see here that there's an inside set of geometry here. Now, because the camera is not going to see these polygons, we're not really going to look at these polygons. You could delete them because you don't really need them for your texture space. But when you have them, they're taking up space on this texture for our UV space, which means that we're going to lose detail in Substance Painter. So again, it really just depends on think about what your camera is going to look at when you're trying to get an asset from Blender or Cinema 4D or ZBrush into Unreal. Whatever your camera is going to look at, make sure you have the polygons there. But if you're not going to see it, maybe it's worth deleting those polygons. Okay, so we have all this mesh. Now, what I will do from here is I'm going to go ahead and hit Control J after I make a box around everything and hit Control J. And what this is going to do is basically give me a combined mesh. So it's just one object. We can go ahead and call this drone underscore tut underscore low. Now from here, we're going to go back to our UV edit mode and leave our wireframe. We don't really need to look at this anymore. We're definitely getting some weird issues, so I am going to right click on this and do shade auto smooth, and that should help bring back some of our hard edges for a lot of our shapes. When you do combine all of your meshes, if some of them don't have the right smoothing, it will create a weird issue, but you can just right click and auto smooth and that should fix it. So from here, what I'm going to do is go to File, Export, FBX, and then we'll call this drone tut to Unreal. Sweet. Make sure that we're using the selected object and then hit apply, and there we go. So now, if you want to bring something into Unreal, I do recommend picking up Substance Painter because it'll allow you to create texture. So we're just going to open that now, and I can show you why you would want to consider doing that. So with Substance Painter open, we'll just click on the mesh that we just exported, drag it into Substance Painter, and then the basic settings I recommend is 4K because we can use as much of the UV space as we want, and then we are not going to use the UV tile workflow, so make sure that this is unchecked, and then we also do not want to unwrap because we did our unwrap in Blender already. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And it's going to take a second because this is a very large mesh, but now we have our geometry in Substance Painter. And generally speaking, if you apply all your modifiers and you bring your mesh in as is, you shouldn't have any issues, because basically when we apply all the modifiers, we're not letting Blender do, and Unreal try and do the triangulation. It's already trying to triangulate all of the geometry here. While we're not getting a triangle preview, we're basically looking at our mesh from a perspective of hey, this is what it would look like in a game engine. And basically, Substance Painter is a good litmus test to make sure that, hey, this applies to a game engine asset. So from here in Substance Painter, my workflow would be going up to the bake button, and then if you're doing a more advanced project where you're actually taking some time to really make something look special and epic and awesome, you would have a high poly and low poly. But we're just going to set the output size to 4K here, use low poly mesh as our high poly because we don't have a high poly mesh, and then we're going to hit bake selected textures. I realize we have some issues down there, but we're just going to ignore that for this tutorial because we're just going to focus on trying to get this into Unreal. So after a short time, the bake is done. Let's go over here and we can see that, hey, look, we have our wireframe, but I can now just go to my smart materials over here and, I don't know, type in metal and find some cool metal that we like. Maybe this like steel painted, yeah, sure, that one looks fine, and apply that. And now we have a mesh. Awesome. Now the reason why this looks so big and weird and gross is because if we hit F2, F3 on the keyboard, we can see that some of these little islands for the mesh, it's still just really small relative to the amount of space it takes up on our UV tile. So if you were to do a much better job at this than I am for this tutorial, which I highly recommend you do, you would get more texture detail, because this steel painted effect is definitely way too large for what we're seeing here. So maybe I'll try something else. I'll try this aluminum instead, and we're not going to get that weird height map, and sure, that's fine. Now from here you would do all the painting things, but for the sake of this tutorial we're not going to go too crazy. I will just go ahead and for funsies go ahead and add a fill layer, add a black mask, add a generator, and then add a metal edge wear, and then hold Alt on the keyboard, and then select my fill layer, hold Alt, select our color. So it's just adding that little extra grunge over there. Okay, cool, awesome. So now what we're going to do is hit Control-Shift-E, go to our output directory and save this somewhere on our computer. Text, drone, tut, demo. Cool, save. And then from here, we want to set the output template to PBR, from PBR metallic roughness to Unreal Packed. Hit export. Let it go. Oh, actually I want to undo that. We need to go back to the settings really quick. Set the file type to EXR. Make sure it's 16-bit, and then save settings, Control-Shift-E, and export again. The reason why we're doing this is Unreal likes EXRs more because you can pack more stuff into a 16-bit image. Okay. All that being said, let's go to Unreal now. So we're in Unreal now, and this is the actual drone that I did where I actually spent more time making it look better, and that's because we spent some time actually setting up the materials. But let's go into the meshes folder, right click, new folder, and we will call this drone tut. Cool. Then from here, we're gonna go ahead and find our mesh that we just made, drop this into Unreal. Now, a couple things I do think are worth mentioning, because this is a 23 megabyte FBX, which is a large file generally speaking. Unreal still may fight back, but one thing that is always worth addressing is if you don't manage your scene scale or your object scale and the object is really tiny, let's say you're working with ZBrush, for example, it will remove polygons from the mesh. So you want to make sure that in the build option, just search remove and uncheck remove degenerates. Basically, if your mesh is too small, it'll start deleting polygons from your mesh, and you don't want that. But we can just go ahead and X that out because it's already unchecked. Hit import, and it's going to take a second because this is a large mesh. And now we have our mesh in our project. So if I go ahead and click and drag this drone in, hey, look, it's there. It does the thing. Let's go ahead and center it up and set the scale to a much lower amount, like 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. 0.05, 0.05, 0.05. Cool. Okay, sweet. So now from here, let's go ahead and look at these side by side. So we have this drone, which is the one that we just exported. The UVs will be different, so we can just go ahead and double check and double click on our material and get rid of this, get rid of all this nonsense, save it. And then we're going to go to our folder where we have our textures, text drone tut, and we're going to take all the EXRs and drop it into our scene. Now, from here, what we need to do is, if you have virtual textures enabled, which I do, it may cause some issues. So what I would recommend, if you're not using UDIMs, right click on the first one with all of them selected, and then go to Asset Actions, and then go to Edit Selection in Property Matrix. Now from here, we're going to select all of them, and then in the search bar of our column, we're going to type in virtual and just make sure we uncheck that because we don't want to use UDIMs and virtual texture streaming, etc. So okay, sweet. Go back to our material, and then we're going to go ahead and take all this stuff and just drop it in. This one is going to go into our base color. This one is going to go, there's nothing there because it's just black, so we can just ignore that. This one is our normal map, so we're going to go ahead and pipe this into the normal, and then we're going to take this one because this is our packed map. Remember in Substance we set the export setting to packed. It's basically taking the roughness, metallic, and ambient occlusion and packing it into a single texture here. So we're going to set the red channel to the ambient occlusion, so RA, and then the green channel to the roughness channel, and then B, the blue channel, to the metallic. And the way I remember that is RAGRBM. I need to think of an acronym for that, but there it is. And then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I go to my normal map, and in the sampler type, I'm going to set this to normal. And then I'm going to go to my texture and find the normal map and make sure that this compression setting right here is set to a normal map instead. Hit save, hit escape, hit yes. We want to save all this stuff. I know I'm kind of blowing through this pretty fast, but hey, look, now our drone is there and it's in Unreal, and it pretty much looks like the drone that we made in Substance Painter and all that. Now, the biggest difference between this drone over here on the left and this drone here on the right is the UV packing that we created for this mesh here. I spent more time actually applying materials, focusing on a good balance of color, adding some more deliberate metal edgeware and some emissive maps versus this one I just slapped on a material. So generally speaking, when it comes to working with making really good assets in any 3D software, whether it's Blender, Cinema 4D, ZBrush, Maya, etc., it really comes down to making sure that you have a good design in mind, a good overall texture set up where you know where the texture is not just going to be a single color. Hey, do we need this to have some extra silver accents or some sort of amount of grunge that's intentional and not just randomly slapping on materials and throwing random stuff on our objects. So all that is to say, the general workflow from Blender to Unreal is pretty easy. once you get the hang of it, it does take practice. Now, if you're confused about this, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'd be happy to make another tutorial. But the workflow is just a step-by-step process of making sure we're collapsing down our modifiers, getting rid of our overall gross proprietary things that live in whatever 3D software you're using, applying UVs, and then texturing it. But the hard part, the really hard part, is like the design and the storytelling and the all that fun stuff. So I use Unreal Engine because I want to be able to make game assets. I'm practicing that. Yes, you could do a lot of this stuff in Blender anyways, but the benefit about this workflow that I like is now I can take any of these assets and use them in any 3D software I want, and that makes me very excited because then I can be a better team player with all the other artists I work with. So, okay. Long-winded rant over. I hope you enjoyed seeing my little workflow and understanding a bit of my perspective on why I prefer to do all of my work in Unreal, even though I do use Blender and EVs right there technically. So if this was helpful, let me know in the comment section down below. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever else. Comment section is down there for that as well. And as always, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight makes. Goodbye, my friends. Bye.